All right, let's see what you guys thought. Number one, the people of Omelas know that they, like the child, are not free. So, first of all, why? I talked with a group about this question, and they said that they're not free because whatever happiness they see, whatever happiness they enjoy, they will always have to remember that it's based on the suffering of this one child. They are not free to fully enjoy what they have. If that's the case, how are these two parts related? How is it that knowing about this suffering child makes them happy and makes them prosper? So I was talking with this group, and the answer they came to is that whenever, let's say you live in Omelas, whenever you do something to increase your happiness or wealth, or the happiness and wealth of your neighbors, whenever you do anything, you always remember that you are able to do this because of that one suffering child. And so you don't want to waste this opportunity. You don't want to waste the child's suffering. You want to make sure you make the most use of what the child is giving you through its sacrifice. So whatever you do to your best effort. If it's your job, you do the best job you can. If you're helping your neighbors, you help them as much as possible. If you're a farmer and you're bringing in food, you also try to bring in as much as possible. I'm looking at page the middle paragraph here. They all understand that their happiness, the beauty of their city, the tenderness of their friendships, the health of their children, the wisdom of their scholars, the skill of their makers, even the abundance of their harvest and the kindly weathers of their skies depend wholly on this child's abominable misery. So whatever they do it much better than they would because they know that a suffering child is enabling them to do it. Even the weather, like how does this change the weather? It probably doesn't, but it can change how humans respond to the weather, whether they think of the weather as a threat or they think of it as a resource or an opportunity. So even here, this could be affected by the knowledge that your possibilities and your happiness are enabled by one suffering child. In Chinese 就不想辜负这个小朋友的折磨了。Okay, do you have other thoughts about the first question? All right, moving on to number two. If this is a story, how would you describe its world? First of all, one group mentioned, is this not a story? If it's not a story, what else could it be? Question 5, if this is an essay. And so the discussion then arose, what is the difference between an essay and a story? Uh, you could read this text as a story or an essay, which means that the difference is not about what is in the thing. The difference must be in how we look at it. Usually when we read an essay, we're looking for information or some kind of message. When we read a story, we can also find the message. We can also find information, but there's much more than that. In a story, we're also looking for the story. We're looking for characters. We're looking for feelings and emotions. We're looking for what kind of world is this? So that's why question 2 is asking about the world of the story. This is something that most people don't look for if they're reading an essay. So I talked to one group about this. How would they describe this world? And they use the word sick, which further discussion revealed that they're really thinking about question 1. Like all of this happiness is tainted. It's not pure happiness. It's mixed with the evil of the child's suffering. So in that sense, you could say that the world is sick. But really, in for everyday citizens of this city, a better description would be unfree, as we were discussing in question 1. Living here makes you feel like you have everything you would ever want, but still you are limited. Still you are not free. Still you are bound by the terms of this city. So, like, for a visitor who doesn't understand the deal that the citizens have made, they might think that this is like the best city in the world. But for people who live there, who understand why they have this happiness, it feels very different. And the author tried her best to give you whatever you think a happy city should have. Right? From the very beginning, the festival of summer, like this must be the happiest moment of the year, right? The moment when the festival of summer begins. Then you have a harbor full of boats. You have cute little houses and gardens, trees, great parks and public buildings. You have this parade for the holiday. People uh, can be quite polite. You have old people dressed in serious clothing. You have all kinds of people, women carrying babies, music in the streets, dancing, children running around. Uh, and you also have a great meadow called the Green Field, so wide open space near the city. You have horses, and you can control the horses with no gear. They are just naturally obedient. The horses are also decorated, and they were also happy. You have great clear air. You have snow-covered mountains nearby. You have a cooling wind that is not too strong. And then, like later on, she's like, "Oh, you don't think this is happy enough? I'll give you more." They're not naive, happy children. They're mature, intelligent, passionate adults. Um, they don't have anything that is destructive, that is not necessary. They have central heating. They have public transportation, home appliances, fuelless power, a cure for the cold. They have a magnificent farmer's market, train station. They even have sexual freedom. And uh, the children, as it says, let the offspring of these rituals be beloved and looked after by all. So even the children who are orphans are well taken care of. They even have a harmless recreational drug. So literally everything that the author could think of to make this city a happy city, she gives us. And then she adds that one little catch. And in her description of this child's living situation, she uses as much descriptive power here as she does describing the happiness of the city. All right, very clear about the room, very clear about its behavior, about its living situations, how it is fed, even its attitude, continuing to beg to be let out, and about its poor health about its unsanitary living situation. So when we're thinking about how would you describe this world? How does it make you feel? Is not just simply saying the most people are the happiest in the world, but then you have one child who is terribly suffering. Just saying that only gives you the idea, but the author gives you a very detailed description, hopefully to make you feel the happiness and to feel the suffering. And that feeling makes the choice feel more real. Feels more like an actual choice, not just a discussion. So question 2 is very important for understanding this story. Okay, thoughts or questions? All right, number 3. Is it in fact hard to believe that some people might walk away? Um, well, the group that I discussed this with pointed out that whether you stay or you go, the child continues to suffer. Nothing you do will or can help that child. The only difference is to yourself. Given that the child is suffering, do you enjoy what that suffering child gives you? Or is the reminder every time you see some happiness that it is built on the suffering of this child? Is that reminder too harsh? So in that sense, right, the happiest city in the world, and you're not helping the child either way. In that sense, it could be quite incredible. Some people would choose to leave, would give all of this up. And the author also describes where they are going, what they are facing. Uh, okay, so they leave the gates of the city. They keep walking across the farmlands. Each one goes alone, so no companions. Night falls, the traveler must pass down village streets between well-lit houses, and they know that these houses are not for them. These are the last signs of civilization before they enter the darkness of the fields and toward the mountains. They walk ahead into the darkness and they do not come back. The place they go towards is a place even less imaginable to most of us than the city of happiness. I cannot describe it at all. It is possible that it does not exist. So, for someone who chooses to leave, there's no idea what they're going to face. All we know is that they leave behind the society and the people and the culture that they have known all of their lives. They leave behind all they understand of human civilization and they go toward the mountains. So to give up all the happiness in the world for something that is completely unknown simply because of your conscience. If you look at it that way, then yes, it is quite incredible. It's not a common thing. Like if you go around, uh, okay, here's a great example. iPhones. We own them, we love them, we are addicted to them. But as I'm sure you know, making one iPhone involves lots of human suffering, including children who have to gather the rare minerals that go into making the chips, making the battery. Children who are often overworked with no safety conditions, children who are not protected from the poison of these materials and the process of mining them. And yet we all choose to use smartphones, myself included. Can you imagine someone who chooses not to use a smartphone because of those children? That is what the author means when she says this is quite incredible. On the other hand, there are people like this. There are sometimes you hear about it like in the news, someone interviews like a famous person and they say, "Oh, I don't have a smartphone." Or you hear about people who live deep in the middle of nature and try to use as little human resource as possible, try to live off the land. There are such people who do exist. And it is precisely because when they are among human society, everything they see, they cannot ignore the suffering and the negative influences of what we usually consider to be benefits and technological advances. It truly is an open question whether someone should stay or whether they should go. It does depend on how much that bargain, that deal, that exchange, how much that weighs on your individual conscience. The author says that for most people, it does not weigh heavily enough to make them give things up. And I agree. Most people in society, I think, would take this deal. Question, or sorry, do you have thoughts about this question? All right, number 4, the I guess the philosophy or the theory behind this world and this discussion. The author says we have a bad habit of considering happiness as something rather stupid. So let's take a look at this in more detail. So let's start from page 74. So she has described the basics of this city. Says, joyous. How is one to tell about joy? How describe the citizens of Omelas? They were not simple folk, you see, though they were happy. But we do not say the words of cheer much anymore. All smiles have become archaic, uh, outdated. Given a description such as this, one tends to make certain assumptions. Right? When presented with a city full of happy people, we start assuming things. But the author says, I repeat, these were not simple folk, not dulcet shepherds, noble savages, bland utopians. They were not less complex than us. The trouble is that we have a bad habit, encouraged by pedants and sophisticates, so people who like to explain things, of considering happiness as something rather stupid. Only pain is intellectual, only evil interesting. So, do you agree with that idea? Do we find pain and suffering more interesting? The group I talked with said yes. Even in our own lives, when you see somebody sitting there, like looking at their phones, not doing anything, a part of you thinks, what are they supposed to be doing? Whereas they could simply be taking a rest. This could be what they're supposed to be doing. They could need that breather between whatever else they're doing. And yet, that is not our first assumption. Similarly, when we tell a story or listen to a story, when we share ideas with each other, we always focus on what is the problem, what is the incident, what happened to make this story take place. But we seldom think about uh, describing a great day, right? Maybe you might share good news, but that good news is always built on the assumption that such a good thing might not have happened. We don't think of happiness as the default state. We think of happiness as what we're working for, our goal. But in fact, happiness can be with us every day, and we may not have noticed it. Um, yes. So whether it's in our literature or in our daily lives, this is a reminder that uh, happiness is not an end state. It is not the end goal only. It is not a point that we reach. It can also be part of the journey. It can be part of our daily lives as well. Thoughts, questions? All right, finally, number 5. We've been talking about this as a story, but what if we think of this as an essay? An essay usually has a message. In this case, what could that message be? So I was talking with a group about this question, and they pointed out that, as we mentioned earlier already, both options are described in great detail, spending lots of time describing how happy people are there. And then the author also spent lots of time describing how much suffering the kid has to go through. And then the author spends time presenting rationalizations, how people deal with this new knowledge. Of course, the first instinct is to try to protect or to save that child. Page 78. But as time goes on, they begin to realize that even if the child could be released, it would not get much good of its freedom. A little vague pleasure of warmth and food, no doubt, but little more. It is too degraded and imbecile to know any real joy. It has been afraid too long ever to be free of fear. Its habits are too uncouth, which means dirty, for it to respond to humane treatment. Indeed, after so long, it would probably be wretched without walls about it to protect it, and darkness for its eyes, and its own excrement to sit in. So the end point of this rationalization is to say the child is happier in that room. If we take it outside, it would be so unfit for the outside world that it would make the child suffer more. Sounds logical. But when we read this, I think we can all agree it's not based on logic. It's based on self-motivation. In English, we call this motivated logic. We think about things in one way because we want it to be true. It's a rationalization. But it is this kind of rationalization that helps them come to terms with their choice to stay in the city. As it says here, their tears at the bitter injustice dry when they begin to perceive the terrible justice of reality and to accept it. Yet it is their tears and anger, the trying of their generosity, and the acceptance of their helplessness, which are perhaps the true source of the splendor of their lives. So it is precisely because of their tears and anger, and because they know they cannot change this situation, that is what makes their lives truly happy. That is what makes their city truly great. Theirs is no vapid, irresponsible happiness. They know that they, like the child, are not free. They know compassion. It is the existence of the child and their knowledge of its existence that makes possible the nobility of their architecture, the poignancy of their music, the profundity of their science. It is because of the child that they are so gentle with children. So the message seems to be that staying, like when we read the story, I think a lot of us, our first reaction is, oh, of course I would leave. That's the right thing to do. But the author tries very hard to show us that staying also has its reasons. That staying is not just the popular choice. For some people, it is the best choice. So the true message of this essay, according to the group I talked with, is that when faced with a terrible situation, you always can choose. Just because you choose the easy path does not make you a bad person. Just because you choose the hard path does not mean everybody else is wrong. Difficult ethical dilemmas like this really depend on the individual person. Okay, other thoughts about today's discussion or today's text? Okay, if not, let's introduce next week. What are we doing next week? Ah, poetry. Yes, great. So next week we're going to read two poems. When you hear me say two poems, you should know that these poems are not short. Um, Both are by the poet Sylvia Plath. Sylvia Plath is probably the most famous woman American poet of the 20th century. She, unfortunately, however, she is famous because she committed suicide. So, uh, gosh, I could say a lot about her. What should I say? Let's talk about her life first. So, uh, she had a pretty good childhood. Grew up to want to write literature and poetry. She wrote a novel, also a feminist novel called The Bell Jar, about how women are treated in society as more than human and also less than human, like they're stuck in a jar that is transparent. You can't see it, but there's always some limitations to what a woman can do in society. Best-selling novel. Feminists and people who cared about gender equality loved it. It's also a very important novel in literary history. But Plath was first and foremost a poet. She ended up marrying the American poet Ted Hughes, but they didn't have a very good marriage, partly because Ted Hughes is apparently a bit of a selfish asshole, and partly because Plath herself suffered from depression. And so after a few attempts, she finally ended up killing herself, leaving behind her first, and I guess at this point, only collection of poems, a book of poems. Here's where the story gets interesting. It was later discovered that her husband, Ted Hughes, not only um, slightly edited her poems, he also changed the order of those poems, removed one or two before publishing the book. And he didn't tell anyone. So and as a human being, this is understandable because some of the poems were about their marriage and about how Plath felt she was suffering in their marriage, how Ted Hughes was not treating her well. So yeah, as a human being, this is an understandable weakness. But as a poet, this is a terrible betrayal. To reorder and edit your dead wife's poems to make yourself look not that bad, to deprive the world of your genius wife's original poetic vision, unforgivable. But you know, later, a few decades later, I think it was after Ted Hughes's death, it was discovered that he had done this. And so Plath's poems were restored, put back in their original order, and republished. However, the most famous edition is still the edition that Ted Hughes put out, because even after his editing, these are really some very powerful poems. And we're going to read two of them to show you why. Lady Lazarus. So you guys know the story of Lazarus from the Bible? Okay, so Jesus did a lot of miracles. One miracle is he resurrected a dead guy. So he's walking around, and then some person goes over and said, Jesus, Jesus, I forgot it was my father or someone, but like a dude named Lazarus has recently died and everybody is so sad. Can you help him? And his disciples, of course, were like, how dare you like make God do like things, etc. But Jesus was like, no, 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 let's go take a look. So he goes over, uh, and then he sees Lazarus dead, lying there, like basically in his coffin. And Jesus is like, oh, like, by the power of God, and you shall rise and you shall walk. And Lazarus gets up and walks away. So Lazarus in Western culture is a symbol of rebirth and resurrection, coming back from the dead. This poem is called Lady Lazarus. And we know that Plath had a very dicey relationship with death. So you can imagine what this poem might be about. It's her own subjective experience of not just her suicide attempts, but also how other people reacted to her suicide attempts. The second poem, Daddy, is a bit more complicated. I'll tell you right now, the poem Daddy is, uh, the poem describes the speaker's father as an authoritarian Nazi. So based on this poem, people often think that Sylvia Plath had a bad relationship with her father, that her father was controlling and a tyrant and abusive. But that's not true. She had a very regular childhood. Her father was not the best father, but he was not a terrible father. And there's no evidence that he abused her in any way. So this is purely, you can say, using the father figure as a symbol. Haha, father figure. As a symbol, Taylor Swift's new song. Anyway, as a symbol for all the men in her life. Or you can say that it is an act of pure imagination. Like, when we talk about Nazis, then we also talk about Jewish people, 犹太人, right? Like if you're comparing someone to a Nazi, then the person's victims are compared to Jewish people. And in this poem, calling her own father a Nazi therefore makes herself a Jew. However, Sylvia Plath was not Jewish. It's more symbolism. Now, the really interesting thing about this is that very recently, like after the year 2000, it was discovered that her father did have some Nazi beliefs, according to like his diaries and his documents. So it is possible that Plath discovered that he had some Nazi beliefs, and that inspired the central symbol of this poem, the central imagery of this poem. But however you want to think about the biographical details, in any case, this is a powerful description of a tortured relationship between father and daughter, of what it feels like to face such a tyrannical, controlling father, and how Plath uses the imagery of one of the worst moments in 20th century history to add power to that relationship. Some people might say to add too much power to that relationship, power that the relationship does not deserve to have. And because we are now entering the second half of the 20th century, well, I guess we entered it with Sonny's Blues, but now that we are deep into the second half of the 20th century, you can go on YouTube and find a recording of Sylvia Plath reading her poems. If you want to hear how she imagined these poems should be read. Questions about next week? Okay. When reading these two poems, Also pay attention to the sound of the words. In fact, I will read the beginning of Lady Lazarus to you, uh, so you can hear what it sounds like, because sound is also a very important part of Plath's poetry. I have done it again. 1 year in every 10. I manage it. A sort of walking miracle. My skin bright as a Nazi lampshade. My right foot a paperweight. My face a featureless fine Jew linen. Peel off the napkin, O my enemy. Do I terrify? The nose, the eye pits, the full set of teeth, the sour breath will vanish in a day. Soon, soon the flesh, the grave cave ate, will be at home on me, and I a smiling woman. I am only 30, and like the cat, I have 9 times to die. This is number 3. What a trash to annihilate each decade. What a million filaments. The peanut crunching crowd shoves in to see them unwrap me hand and foot. The big striptease. Gentlemen, ladies, these are my hands, my knees. I may be skin and bone. Nevertheless, I am the same identical woman. The first time it happened, I was 10. It was an accident. The second time I meant to last it out and not come back at all. I rocked shut as a seashell. They had to call and pick the worms off me like sticky pearls. Dying is an art like everything else. I do it exceptionally well. I do it so it feels like hell. I do it so it feels real. I guess you could say I've a call. It's easy enough to do it in a cell. It's easy enough to do it and stay put. It's the theatrical come back in broad day to the same place, the same face, the same brute amused shout. A miracle! That knocks me out. There is a charge for the eyeing of my scars. There is a charge for the hearing of my heart. It really goes. And there is a charge, a very large charge, for a word or a touch or a bit of blood, or a piece of my hair or my clothes. So, Herr Doctor. So, Herr Enemy. I am your opus. I am your valuable, the pure gold baby that melts to a shriek. I turn and burn. Do not think I underestimate your great concern. Ash, ash, you poke and stir. Flesh, bone, there's nothing there. A cake of soap, a wedding ring, a gold filling. Herr God, Herr Lucifer, beware, beware. Out of the ash I rise with my red hair, and I eat men like air. All right, see you guys next week.